In this module, we're going to focus strictly on your research papers. As I said before, the last module was probably the most difficult in terms of reading material and trying to juggle short stories and an essay and the research paper. But all three of your shorter essays are finished now, so we can focus strictly on the research paper for a bit. That being said, I want us to start in chapter 12 on argumentation. It has a lot of information in your textbook that you really need to have a strong grasp of before you start writing a lot of your research paper. The first section in the chapter is what it is not. And many people get confused between an argumentation paper is not just arguing. An argumentation paper uses a concrete evidence to prove a point. Definitely go through the emotional appeal information, and I find that most often when you start with an anecdote, and anecdotes can be a nice way to start a paper, don't get me wrong, but when you use emotional appeal, it almost feels a little bit fake if you pull too much, and you want your reader to come along for your argument and not immediately get put off by the fact that you're imposing feelings on the reader. The other part is avoiding a topic that's too close to your heart that you can't be objective. I certainly want you to pick a topic that you do feel some connection to, but you have to be careful that you're not so connected that it begins to hinder your judgment and it makes it difficult for you to write an unbiased paper. There are some further information in the chapter about logical fallacies, and I advise you to look over that as well. Formulating a thesis, we talked about a bit last week, and then respecting the other side. You will need to find information on the opposing side so that you can address that the opposing side exists. I will take your argument much more strongly if I know that you aren't just blabbering about your own opinion, but you've looked into the other side and you can say, while the other side may say such and such and such, and then refute it with your own text evidence. So you can look through that part, and there's actually a sample organization on pages 96 and 97 in this edition, as well as a sample essay from an instructor, and it does not have sources, but a sample essay from a student does have sources. So that would be exactly the kind of paper you are wanting to write. If you have any question about, I'm not sure what this looks like, those sample papers would be a good place to start. After you've looked through that and you tweaked your thesis statement from the last module, work on your introduction. Now, some people start well with the introduction. I personally usually write my introduction last, which is kind of strange, but I'm asking you to just post a working introduction so that we can kind of get an idea of where you're going with your paper. I always just kind of jot something as an outline of my introduction first, write my whole paper, see where I end up, and then go back. And so that's what I'm asking you to do basically, is to write a rough introduction with your thesis at the end, and then once we've gone through the paper and you've done your rough draft, you can go back and revise it and make sure that it's concise from beginning to end. Your two assignments to turn in for this module are an annotated bibliography and then some actual writing where you pick one side. So for your annotated bibliography, take a look at pages 237 and 239. You have an excellent description in your textbook as well as a sample. So take a look at both of those before you turn yours in. But basically, an annotated bibliography is a list of sources, so I want to see at least 6 sources that you have found so far with their complete MLA citation, and at the very end of the citation, right after you've put your date of access or print or whatever your last word is, go right into the author's credibility, the main idea of the source, and how the source will work in your research paper. So this is helping me see that you have read these articles or books and you know that the author's credible, you have a good idea of what the article is about, and you see how it fits into what you're writing about. You can look at the annotated bibliography, honestly, as just a way for me to check with you on what you're doing instead of doing note cards, and a way for you to keep up with your sources as you go so that you don't get confused about who wrote what and which source, because that's very bad and causes a lot of frustration later on. For the other research log, you're actually going to start writing some of your paper. So instead of sitting down to write a 1500 word paper and having a blank screen, I'm asking you to just write a few paragraphs. So it's going to be roughly a page. So you'll pick one of your sides. It can be the side that you are personally actually for, or the side that you aren't for, and use at least 2 sources to just flesh out what that one side thinks. Now, granted, this won't be half of your paper or anything like that, but it will give you a starting place. You can get some feedback from me on source integration and citation, and it will help you when you start your rough draft that you've already written some of it. So, as I said before, all we're looking at for this module is your research paper. And if you have any questions, if you are having a hard time finding 6 sources at this point, you need to message me so that we can talk about which avenues you have already looked down, what search terms you've used, have you been looking in the databases, have you looked on Google Books and all kinds of things like that. Please be in touch with me. I do not want you to get behind. So stay in touch this week, and I will be checking in with some of you as we go, and I'm looking forward to see what you come up with.